Well, it's good to be with you again today as we continue in Chapter 4 on industry. Let's go ahead and get organized for our lesson today. For materials, the beloved Activity 4.2, which you've been working on, you can continue filling that in during our lesson today. Maybe you already finished it on your own sometime, but if not, you can continue on that today. Outline of the chapter. Agenda, we're going to start with our review. Our main topic today is infrastructure, and we'll also be talking about alternative sources of energy, doing a little bit of map work and statistical highlights as much as we have time for toward the end. Our main idea today, infrastructure, trade, finance, general services, and government are the 5 basic service industries. And again, we are going to spend most of our time talking about infrastructure. On the goals today, you need to distinguish goods and services, identify examples of tertiary industries, identify 3 types of infrastructure, recognize that most workers in advanced countries work in tertiary industries. So let's go ahead and get started today with our chapter verse or verses. Go ahead and read these with me. Genesis 1:27 through 28. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And we are going to start with our review as usual. We're going to go ahead and review. I think this covers everything that we've done so far, starting at the beginning of our chapter. All right? Primary or secondary. Which industry extracts natural resources from the earth and which refines raw materials? Okay, our primary industries extract natural resources, and the secondary industries refine raw materials. Okay, which one? Construction or manufacturing? Which one creates new products, and which one creates new cities and buildings? Okay, manufacturing creates new products, while construction creates new cities and buildings. Which one, technology or information? Which one harnessed electricity, and which one led to post-industrial society? Okay, technology harnessed electricity. Remember, technology is the application of science to industry, and the information revolution led to our post-industrial society. Which one, crude oil or petrochemicals? Which one is extracted from the ground, and which one is extracted from kerosene? Crude oil is extracted from the ground, while petrochemicals are a result of kerosene, extracted from kerosene. Which one, durable or non-durable? Food, tobacco, and leather, and lumber, stone, and glass. Food, tobacco, and leather are non-durable. Just think that you eat food and so it doesn't endure. And lumber, stone, and glass are what durable manufacturing relies on to create its products. Okay, so far we have devoted our time to primary and secondary industries which produce goods. Primary and secondary industries produce goods or products that you can touch. You can buy it and take it home with you. Tertiary industries, however, do not produce goods of this nature. They don't produce things that you can buy and carry home with you. They are services. Tertiary industries are services. Service industries because they provide services. And we can define services as intangible products. If you go somewhere and get your hair cut, that's going to be a service. It's not something that you can take home with you. So see if you can identify whether these people working in industries are providing goods or services. Okay, here is an industrial worker. Not very specific, but would he most likely be providing goods or services? Goods, probably, in that type of factory. What about a banker? Services. Sometimes they give you money to take home, but most of the time they're just giving you service. What about a carpenter? It's giving you a good or goods, providing goods for you. Your home, most likely. A fireman or firemen are providing a service, protection from fire. What about a wooden shoemaker? He's not wooden, but he's making shoes that are wooden. He's providing you a good that you can take home with you. Goods. Fishermen. Fishermen are providing goods, the fish that you take home and eat. What about a logger? He's also providing goods, lumber, that can be taken home. What about soldiers? Goods or services? They're providing a service, a protection. A lawyer. Okay, a lawyer isn't providing something that you can take home. A lawyer provides a service. A blacksmith. Goods. An engineer. Services. And finally, a baker. That looks good. Making me hungry. That is goods. Goods that you can take home with you and munch on. All right, so that gives you an idea of what we're talking about, whether someone's providing a service or whether they're providing a product that is tangible, something that you can touch and take home with you. Now, the service industries are divided into 5 subcategories. Our tertiary industries include infrastructure, trade, finance, general services, and government. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to spend the bulk of our time on infrastructure, which might sound like a complicated idea, but it's really not. Just remember 2 E's. Think of it. It's too easy to remember what it is. 2 E's, energy and equipment, the basic energy and equipment that are needed to run an industry. All industries need basic energy and equipment. And there are only 3 types: utilities, transportation, and communication. Now, isn't that simple? You've probably heard the word utilities mentioned at home when it's time to pay the bills, because some of those things come around every month to be paid. Utilities are basic services and include things like electricity, gas, water, trash collection, and sewage disposal. Now, notice that electricity and gas are both used to produce energy, one of those basic needs, things like air conditioning and stoves and anything else basically that you want to run in your house. And the common denominator of all forms of energy is the British thermal unit. You might have studied maybe in science before, the BTU. It's the amount of heat required to raise the temperature of 1 pound of water 1 degree Fahrenheit. But electrical energy is measured in watts, most often kilowatts and kilowatt hours. Now, a kilowatt hour is the energy needed to burn 10, as you see here, 10 bulbs, 100-watt bulbs for 1 hour. So if you had 100-watt bulbs and you went in 10 rooms and turned them on and let them burn for an hour, that's the amount of energy that a kilowatt hour is. And I have a sample electric bill to show you the kilowatt hours, electricity usage, total kilowatt hours 1,375. That's a lot of light bulbs for a long time. And then they also do the favor of comparing it to last year, so you can see if you're using more energy or less. Days, 31 this month, only 19 last month in the time period before they actually came out and measure. They usually estimate and then come measure. Average per day, 44. That year it was actually 50, so it was actually higher because it was a fewer number of days. Average cost per day, only $2.71 here. Still seems like a lot, but more conservative than last year, which was $3.03. Okay, so kilowatt hours, that's what you'll see when you get your own place someday and have electricity that you're paying. Now, man has for a long time been concerned about energy and conserving energy and finding alternative sources of energy. So I want to take a moment to learn more about that.
Today's scientists are estimating that our nation's oil reserves may last another 100 years, coal another 250. What then? What happens to a nation, a world, when the energy sources they have depended on for centuries suddenly run out? With this question in mind, scientists are hard at work discovering and developing new sources of energy with which we may fuel our lives. They have two types of resources to draw from, renewable and non-renewable. The non-renewable resources are those that will run out someday. Unfortunately, 92% of the energy in the United States comes from non-renewable resources. The majority of this energy comes from fossil fuels, petroleum, natural gas, and coal. These are the resources which we are currently consuming. The rest of the energy produced by these non-renewable resources comes from nuclear fuel, like that generated at the Oconee Nuclear Power Plant in South Carolina. With the horrors of World War II came the introduction of this new source of energy, nuclear fuel. Splitting atoms can create sufficient heat to drive steam turbines to make electricity. Unfortunately, nuclear power has serious drawbacks. Hazardous wastes are created by the dangerous radioactive minerals used in nuclear fission. These wastes must be stored or deposited in a safe place, where they will be unable to harm the environment. The high costs and problems with disposal have prevented nuclear power from achieving a high level of popularity and use. On the other hand, the most important source of renewable energy, moving water, has widespread popularity and use. Since before the Romans invented the first water wheel 2,000 years ago, man has been learning to harness the power and to utilize the resources found in the Earth's waters. The same year scientists learned to make electricity from steam, they also learned to turn turbines with dammed water. A controlled intake of water flows through pipes to turn turbines. These spinning turbines provide the energy for generators to run and generate electricity. Dams, like the Hoover Dam in Nevada, are capable of producing enormous amounts of hydroelectricity. Each year, the Hoover Dam produces over 4 billion kilowatt hours of energy. That's enough to supply all the electricity needed by a city of 750,000 people. Today, the United States has dammed almost all of its major rivers to take full advantage of the country's potential for hydroelectricity. Unfortunately, scientists have been unable to discover an economical way to harness the greatest source of energy in the universe, the sun. Using solar energy to heat water and converting sunlight to electricity on metal chips are much costlier methods than the use of fossil fuels to produce the same effect. Solar panels like these are being used today, but they have not achieved a very high level of cost efficiency. Biofuels, such as plants and wastes, is one renewable resource being used successfully in the creation of usable energy. On the other hand, the use of geothermal energy, or heat from the earth, is not very widespread. Where it is used, it is among the most polluting, releasing gases and corrosive chemicals. The wind which carries those pollutants also happens to be one of the major untapped resources on Earth. Experts estimate that as much as 20% of the United States' electrical needs could be supplied by wind. But in most cases, wind generators would take up too much area to be practical. Right now, the Earth's unrenewable resources are the least expensive, and therefore the most used. Perhaps in 250 years, people will wish they had paid the price to hold on to their unrenewable resources. But by then, it will be too late.
All right, now let's summarize what we learned from the mini documentary there about energy and its sources. Two types, non-renewable and renewable. Let's look first at non-renewable, like fossil fuels and nuclear fuels. In your textbook on page 74, there's a chart that depicts this for us. Our documentary stated that 92.5% of the energy used in the U.S. is non-renewable, and here's what we see depicted on our pie chart. 84.5% of that is fossil fuel, and 8% of that is nuclear fuel. The fossil fuel is broken down here on the right in this mini chart. Petroleum, 38%, natural gas, 24.5%, and coal, 22%. Those are the fossil fuels being used. And then only 7.5% of the energy is actually renewable energy. And just a reminder, our renewable sources are hydroelectricity, biofuel, geothermal, solar, and wind. Seems like it should be like windular or something like that, but it's just wind. And this is shown. This is our orange slice that's renewable, and it's broken down here. 15.5% hydroelectricity, biofuel 43%. Notice that biofuel is broken down into wood 34% because you can grow the trees back again. Solid waste 7.5%. Pretty sure we'll never run out of that. Alcohol 1.5%. Geothermal energy 5%, solar 1%, and wind only 0.5% being used there. Part of the reason that some of these sources, they sound like, wind sounds like a great source. Why don't we use more of that? That sounds like it'd be really simple. But if you look across the page to page 75, we see here the cost of 1 kilowatt hour of electricity. Notice non-renewable energy, 4, 5, and 7 cents for the different energies there. Renewable, hydroelectric, 3, biofuel 7, wind 8 cents, so it's twice as expensive as natural gas. Geothermal's 8 cents, solar and solar cell 12 and 35 cents. Okay, so some of them aren't as practical, like a solar cell, are not as practical as some of the other fuels that are being used. One interesting resource, though, is biofuel. A hog farm in California uses biogas or methane from the decomposition of hog waste to generate 140 kilowatts of electricity per hour, more than enough to power the entire farm, which saves them $3,000 a month in electric bills. Plus, they have a surplus worth $600 a month, and they sell that to the local power company. So there are a lot of options out there as far as energy goes. Now, another important part of infrastructure, we've talked about our utilities, is the transportation system. You probably know a lot about this one already. Do you know the basic choices for transportation? 3 basic choices. You can travel water, land, or air. I was thinking land, sea, and air. Water, land, or air are our 3 choices. And there's a map in your textbook on page 73 that depicts those 3 choices. Not every single choice is depicted here. There are other ways to travel over land, but the choices are depicted here. You want to turn to this page so that you can see all of the details. The yellow or the gold color is area within 25 miles of motorable road. Some roads are not road. You might have a path in some countries, but it's not something that you could actually drive over. Okay. Major ocean trade route. Notice some are very thick lines. Those are the really major ones, and the thinner lines, they're also considered major, but they're not as big. Navigable rivers are a dark blue. You can see those on the different continents. And major airports are the little red dots. Okay, so now that we know what everything stands for, let's use this to answer a few questions. Which 2 continents appear to have the densest collection of motorable roads? Okay, that's a pretty easy one to figure out. Just look for the most yellow. North America is practically totally yellow, and then Europe is practically totally yellow. India would probably come in next, right on the heels of those 2 continents. How many major ocean trade routes go all the way to the shores of the U.S.? And again, they're listed major, but the thick ones are the ones we really want to refer to as major. And we can count them here: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all on the East Coast. There is one major one, but then it branches off to 2 smaller ones here on the West Coast. Which continent has the most navigable rivers? The least, not including Antarctica, of course. Okay, you might have to do a little bit of counting, but look through, kind of count them up. Asia actually has the most navigable rivers, and Australia the least. What continent appears to have the most major airports? Okay, just look for the most red dots, and that's going to be North America. Which river appears to have the most connections to motorable roads and airports? And that is going to be our Mississippi River, because of the density of the roads and the airports right there in the United States. Now, there's one obvious advantage of water. I think we talked about it before. God created the waterways. Nobody had to chisel them out of the mountains or anything like that, like they did with roads. So that saves man the time and trouble of having to build them. And with water, of course, we have rivers. They're not as good a system because many of them do have shallow water, which limits the distance of transportation. The ocean, though, remains a vital way to transport goods, and it also allows you to transport all over the world, not just in a particular area like a river does. Though, of course, rivers are still used for a great deal of transportation. Now, there are 2 inventions that were especially important to land travel. Those are the steam engine, which helped men produce locomotives, and the gasoline engine, of course, which helped us with automobiles. You'll notice, however, that rail has diminished in importance compared to trucks. However, for transporting bulky goods like raw materials, trucks, trains, and ships are still used. A good rule of thumb is that trucks are best for short hauls, a radius of about 300 miles. Rail is best for up to 2,000 miles, and ships are going to be the best for the longer distances because the wear and tear on them is less. Now, do you think air would be a practical way to transport raw materials? Well, air happens to be the fastest method of transportation. It's the least limited by geographic features. However, it is very expensive, and the expense of air travel makes it practical for people and small products, but not for bulky raw materials. And we want to take just a moment to look at some international transportation statistics. And here we have our countries in alphabetical order: railroad miles, cars, persons per car, miles of paved roads, density of paved roads, airplane passenger miles, and airports. Okay, so this is how much traveling is done by passengers. All right, let's use this to answer a few questions. In which categories is the U.S. the clear leader? Okay, just look here, United States, and you can find the number and kind of glance up the chart. Railroad miles, yes. Cars, yes. Persons per car, no. Miles of paved roads, yes, by far. Density, no. Several above us. Airplane passenger miles, yes. Definitely the most. And airports, more than twice the next country with 400 in Australia. Okay, now which countries match the U.S. in persons per car? Okay, as we noticed when we were looking just now, several. Australia, 2, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, and the United Kingdom. So several have as many persons per car. Now, which countries have a higher density of paved roads in the U.S. and why? And again, there are several of those countries. Here is our density of paved roads. The United States has 0.60, so we're looking for anything higher than that. We have France, Germany, India, Italy, Japan, Mexico, and the United Kingdom. Why do you think that they have a greater density of paved roads while the United States has more than twice as many roads than the next highest country, Brazil? So when we're talking about density, that has to do with how close together the roads are. And those nations that have the higher density have a smaller land area. Okay, so they don't have more roads, but they have a greater proportion of road to land than the United States does. Now, the final type of infrastructure that we want to look at today is communication. How many types of communication are there? To get you started thinking, I'd like for you to make a list of ways you received communication yesterday. List all the possible forms you can think of. Okay, now I can't possibly list everything, but you could have received a phone call, you could have watched TV, you could have listened to the radio, you could have got an email, a fax, you could have chatted to someone on the internet. You can actually talk to people and see people on the internet now if your family has those cameras. You could have read a billboard, a cereal box, a book. You could have watched a VCR tape or a DVD or listened to a CD. And I could just go on and on and on. A photograph. My personal favorite, you could talk to someone face to face. There are a couple of unique means of communication that man has come up with, that modern man has developed, and those are Braille and sign language. And I happen to have a sample of Braille here with me. I'm going to get really close to it because it's actually something that has to be felt, but you can see the raised dots. This is just showing the pattern of dots that shows the alphabet. And then a message here typed out with a special typewriter on just a bag, like a grocery bag type of material, a thick type of paper. And the other special type is sign language, which also has its own special alphabet, you might have learned before, and symbols for the different words in the language. Now, communication is divided into print media and electronic media. Print media is divided into two categories: personal communication, like letters and packages, and mass communication, like oral communication, speeches and lectures, and published communication. Publishing is a very profitable industry today. Books, newspapers, magazines, although technically publishing is non-durable manufacturing, it's not a tertiary industry, but there's a lot more labor that goes into editing it and gathering the information than into printing it. Electronic media is telecommunications, sending messages through electronic impulses like the telephone, radio, and television. And we're going to stop there and pick up there next time and continue with the other tertiary industries and on into the wealth of nations. Now let's look at your assignment. Read pages 72 through 78. You'll be reading a little bit that we haven't covered yet. Section review on page 78 as well. Then, where in the world, who supplies the most cork? That is Portugal. And next time, see if you can find the answer to this. Where is the world's longest railway?